Aloha, my friends. My name is Ameera Beth Mer Healer. I am an incarnated Mer person and an ambassador between the Mer world and the community of the Great Kingdom of Atlantis. I reside in this lifetime on the beautiful island of Kauai, and I have been given the task or the mission by the Atlantean High Council to bring forth information, wisdom, and knowledge from the Great Kingdom of Atlantis and from the Mer Beings. And so in this video series, this is maybe my fifth that I've done so far on the Great Kingdom of Atlantis. The information just kind of, I just do my videos kind of randomly as the information comes in or as I feel the need to speak. So none of these are in particular order. I did speak about the fall of the Great Kingdom of Atlantis a little bit in one of my former videos, so I'm going to pick that up in this video and speak to you a little bit more about the truth as I recall and as I am told by the Atlantean High Council to bring forward to humanity at this time, to assist us all in our great awakening and in the vision or the mission or the intention of Prime Creator and the Atlantean High Council to raise Atlantis. Atlantis is rising. Once again, we were all present. We were all there for an incarnation of the Great Kingdom. Now, Atlantis was a civilization that existed for hundreds of thousands of years. And there was between 3 and 5 incarnations of the great landmass of Atlantis. There are some channels out there who will tell you that there were 5. I remember 3 major incarnations. Through most of the incarnations of Atlantis and Lemuria, I was a Mer Being. I was in the water. And so a couple of the earlier incarnations, I was strictly water being. And as Atlantis was being created in some of the early experiments, I was not so much part of that. I was more a part of the last 3 incarnations, most notably the very last one that ended about 13,000 years ago. The golden era of Atlantis. And many of us have heard, myths and rumors about what was Atlantis. Did Atlantis really exist? Yes, of course, it did exist. And I believe that every one of you watching, every one of us on this planet alive today, or alive in this, in this era, had at least one or more incarnations in Atlantis. And we are all back revisiting, reliving, rewiring, rewriting a spiral of time, the spiral of time, the very last spiral of time after Atlantis fell for the very last time. Most of us have been told, if you're familiar with Atlantis and with the civilization of Atlantis, most of us have been told that Atlantis was a failure, that it failed, that it was an experiment for folks to exist in a 3rd dimensional physical body and see if they could retain their 5th dimensional consciousness. And we were told that because they could not, that Atlantis fell and that it was a failure. And that is absolutely not true. The number one thing you need to know is Atlantis was not a failure. Atlantis was actually a great success. Whenever there is an experiment, and Atlantis was an experiment, variables need to be added into the experiment to see what will happen. Otherwise, there's nothing to experiment with. So as the humanoids who came from all around galaxies and planets who volunteered to take part in the experiment time after time, incarnation after incarnation, came down to Earth in their very high vibration with their great plans for existing in a human, a physical, 3D dense body with 5 senses. Atlantis was a beautiful utopian paradise where all were accounted for, all were cared for, the vibrations were very high, and the people existed really in true oneness. As with all experiments, a variable has to be added. So the experiment would need to include inserting ego, or inserting different variables that would allow people to be able to experience duality, to maybe experience themselves outside of oneness, what we would call duality, in order to figure out if they were going to be able to retain their connection to the divine. So before we all came, we knew this was the experiment, this was the test, and we knew that at some point in our utopian, beautiful, high vibrational, perfect lives, there would be something that would be called maybe the dark element, or the darkness that would be inserted into the equation to see how we did. We all knew that it was very possible that we were going to forget our divinity and forget our connection. But we knew we were eternal. We knew Atlantis had gone down for the very same reasons several times before. And some of us were there during those other incarnations where Atlantis fell, because of ego, because of the dark element, because of the people forgetting that we are connected to everything and everyone, that we are source, that we are eternal. But before we came, we really knew that. And we really accepted the fact that it might be possible that Atlantis was not going to be able to continue to exist, because the insertion of ego might tear it apart again. And we knew that, and we were willing to participate, because we as souls, we are great experimenters. We are creators, right? We are creators. That is what we long to do. And there's only so much we can create if we're in a non-physical form, and everything's perfect and wonderful, and everybody's getting along. There's really no challenges in a spirit form. So Prime Creator and the Atlantean High Council, and I'll talk a lot more about the Atlantean High Council in future videos, create an opportunity for souls to come and be something totally different. These humans that were potentially capable of taking on duality and ego. So we all came. My service was to come up from the Mer world and to serve as a guide to the humans. I had other incarnations of myself, of my higher self, that did exist as human in Atlantis, existed in the temples, existed in service. It existed as a humanoid. And an interesting thing about being a multidimensional being, which we all are, and having all these other aspects, is you can literally incarnate at the same time, same place as one of your other aspects. And you may or may not even realize that that's you. That's another part of your soul aspect. So there were parts of me that did incarnate during the times of Atlantis into human form, and had other tasks. The part that I am most connected to is my Mer element, my Mer aspect. That's the part of me that is incarnated back into this line of time. So back to the story. All Atlanteans knew that we were creators, that we were eternal, and we really didn't know it was going to happen, but we came anyway, because we knew we were eternal beings, and we knew it didn't matter what happened at the end, that there was no such thing truly as success or failure, because all things are allowed. And we just came to see what we could create, what would happen. So as ego was inserted into the civilization, into the population, and as people began to compare themselves against each other, and to desire to accumulate, greater wealth, or better or different clothing, or better or different status than their neighbor, or than what they had before, through the opportunity to come into more power, through opportunity, as that was inserted into the population, and we began to forget that we are eternal, that we were one, that we're all in this together. And as the vibration of Atlantis fell, it did bring in great cataclysms. And you've heard stories about the earthquakes and about the floods and about how the great kingdom went down as a result of these great cataclysms that had to do with, our connection instead to technology and to the physical and to material goods and to wealth and to power and into separation and classes or caste systems that were not the original divine or blueprint for Atlantis. So the story that has been given about Atlantis falling is that it was a mistake or that it was a failure. And you need to know that's absolutely not true. Atlantis was never, ever a failure. It was absolutely a magnificent success. And because we were human, and connected to emotions, humans are very emotionally attached creatures. As we became attached to the land, to our lifestyle, to the people, to our families, as Atlantis started to deteriorate, we forgot that all is well and all is one and that we are eternal. And we fought and we held on and we became attached. And when, and from being in this current incarnation, that anytime we emotionally attach to something and won't let it go, what happens? It just recreates more resistance in the body. It just creates more distortion around us. It creates a falling in vibration. But part of human nature is to be very emotionally attached to everything and everyone in our life, which we are, of course, attempting to unlearn in this incarnation. But because we were fifth dimensional beings in a third dimensional body and got very used to the physical and the five senses and the emotions and lived and moved through them and not such a fifth dimensional way, we really, really fought the downfall of Atlantis. And it was when it was time for the experiment to be over, instead of just remembering, okay, well, time for the experiment to end, time for this body to go back in and be eternal, to be spirit for the next creative venture, we mourned it and we fought it. And we allowed what would be called the dark element. And the dark element was allowed in. It was always part of the plan. What we would call the dark element or evil or whatever was allowed from the beginning to be inserted into the experiment. And we all knew that it was going to happen, but of course we forgot. We have amnesia. We come down to a human body, we forget all these grand plans by the creator, our vibration falls, distortions in our energy field, and we forget that it's just all part of the divine plan. So when Atlantis fell, when it finally sank, and there was so much mourning and so much loss, and I remember all aspects of myself, and particularly the Mer aspect of myself. I loved the Atlanteans. I loved the people. I loved the land. I loved the community. I especially loved that I got to come and walk the earth with these, shape-shifting lakes and walk among the humans. I too mourn very, very deeply for the suffering of the humans that I held so dear, and for those memories and for those connections. And so as Atlantis came and fell beneath the waves, as the great quakes took it away, and the people went down in their suffering, what we would call the dark element made sure that those of us who held high places in Atlantis, the priests and the priestesses, the kings and the queens, those of us who felt really responsible, made sure to whisper a little something in our ear to make us feel extra responsible for the downfall of Atlantis. And it is that distortion that we have actually carried in different embodiments and in our cellular memory, in our DNA through the ages. It's that distortion of failure or of loss, or if I didn't do my job well enough. And you know, in my healing work, I'm a regression therapist. I work a lot with people who have past lives and past life trauma in Atlantis, who know that their soul origins, like they have a big part of themselves that is from Atlantis, from that time, or the Mer world, and that it's still suffering because that part of them is still lost, or still in that distortion of the failure and of the community that they love so much, um, basically being eliminated. And that trauma has followed most of humanity in some way, unconsciously, into this incarnation. So as we start to revisit the spiral where, you know, technology and materialism and kind of rape and pillage of the earth have become so prominent, and it seems like everything is going downhill again, I call it creative destruction. Creator's job, nature's job, is to create, destroy, and recreate. That is the nature and the cycle of all of life. Everything works in creation, destruction, and recreation. All cycles of nature, everything we see around us goes in a cycle. That's just the nature of God and life. Energy is always just transformed into something else, not created, not destroyed, just recreated into something else. But first, something has to be eliminated, or destroyed, so to speak, for something else new to be birthed. And we knew the plan before we came. That was the plan. And that recreation could only happen clearly and without disharmony if we surrendered to it, if we gave into it. So if you are one of those who are resonating with this message that Atlantis was a great disaster, and that maybe you were part of it, and if you're carrying that trauma or that fear in this reality in February of 2019, as you're watching the cycles happening on this planet again, my message to you today is that there was absolutely no failure, and there was absolutely no fault. We all played, we all participated, we all created and uncreated what came next, which was the reset button for Prime Creator to create something else. So if you feel responsible, if you feel you were a priest in the temples, you're off the hook. Okay? Ameera says, you're off the hook. It was not your fault. It was not anybody's fault. It was just the termination of one experiment. So another experiment, which is the one we're in now, could begin again. We are collectively rewriting the spiral of time. Rewriting, not rewriting, rewriting. We are now third dimensional beings attempting to rise back up through ascension into fifth dimensional consciousness beings and bodies. Our bodies are changing. So we're actually doing the reverse this time. We're rewriting how Prime Creator is rewriting how it's going to happen. Instead of coming up here and coming down to 3D, we are landing in 3D. We're kind of picking up where we left off and rising back up to 5D and above. Atlantis was never a failure. Atlantis was a glorious, glorious community, and I can't wait to bring you more videos on the priest and priesthood, on the sacred geometry of Atlantis, more on the Mer people, of course, and all kinds of other topics. So if this has helped you today gain a little bit more understanding of what your role might have been, or what may have really, gone down while we were in Atlantis, then fantastic. You can find me, by the way, at ameerabeth.com. I am a healer here. I do something called the Sacred Touch of Atlantis, which is a 13 chakra energy clearing, regression therapy, soul progressions, lots of other things, classes, sacred geometry, clothing. You can find me at ameerabeth.com or on Facebook under Ameera Beth Mer Healer. I thank you for tuning into this video today. They really, really mean a lot to me. These first videos have kind of been a little bit surfacey. surfacey information. I'm kind of bringing us all in slowly to go really, really deeply and intricately, you got me, into deepening our understanding of who we are, who we really are as metahumans, who we really are as masters, and how our 13 chakras and our master chakra are allowing us to step into our metahuman master status. Aloha.